So, today we're going to be talking about primary production processes. And primary production is the starting point of all other life in marine systems. It's how life in the ocean comes into existence, if you will. Primary production, as we've seen, is the process by which organic compounds are produced from carbon dioxide. You could say that these organic compounds are the building blocks of life, because living organisms are made up of organic compounds. Okay? Okay. Let's just go back a step and remind ourselves about photosynthesis, because this is really at the centre of what we mean when we're talking about primary production. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants and algae use energy from sunlight to produce new organic matter. These photosynthetic organisms exist in huge numbers, enormous numbers, and they're the basic primary producers, the fundamental food source that marine ecosystems are based on. In very simple terms then, what happens is that energy from sunlight is absorbed by the plant or the algae, and this energy is used to convert or synthesize carbon dioxide into organic compounds, especially sugars. And this organic matter is broken down through the process of respiration to release energy and heat. And as we know, oxygen is also produced as a byproduct of this process. If you think about the coastal marine environment, you have various plants and algae, the long seagrasses and seaweeds, and underwater kelp beds. And these photosynthetic organisms, the primary producers, they actually grow and develop in a very similar way to their terrestrial counterparts, their land-based counterparts. That is to say, they take in carbon through photosynthesis, and they grow by absorbing nitrogen and phosphorus, and a lot of other minerals and trace substances. And in the process, of course, they generate new biomass. In other words, the whole mass of biological organisms which we find in the oceans. So what we have here is a process going on by which inorganic carbon is being converted into living matter. And this living matter is the basis of life in the ocean. And what we're seeing essentially is a massive global cycle of production and consumption. It's been calculated annually, so every year, that this cycle of production and consumption produces the same amount of energy as 150,000 nuclear power stations. And it's also extremely efficient in terms of conversion rate. We're talking about 40% of the sun's energy absorbed being converted into organic material, which is actually slightly better than the most efficient power station. Okay, moving on. Let's take a closer look at the plants and algae involved in this process. Plants include, for example, seagrasses, but algae are also a major part of the process. Now, you might think of algae as being quite small, like in the picture here, but in fact, seaweeds are algae too, not plants, and they're known as macroalgae. Some of these macroalgae can reach up to 50 meters in length, and their rate of growth is very fast too. At the other end of the scale, you have microalgae, which, as you might expect, you can only see through a microscope. But put together, these organisms are what generate most of the primary production in the oceans, so they're incredibly important.